Okay, so welcome back, everyone. We took this break to just refresh. I hope that you refreshed after this kind of a heavy introduction. Today, we are honored really to have Professor Monzer Kahf with us. He has a BA in business from the University of Damascus, 1962, PhD in economics, the University of Utah, Salt Lake City in Utah in March 1975. He's a professor of Islamic economics and banking. He's a writer of several books of really great books of awqaf, zakat, Islamic finance, and banking and other areas of Islamic economics. He's been lecturing in this field for more than 32 years, really. And he is one of the pioneers in the field, if I were to say. He won various prizes in this field, and we have him today with us, honored to be speaking with us about the subject of the development of Islamic economics in the modern age. Professor Monzer, you're more than welcome. We are honored to have you with us today.
Well, thank you very much. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Thanks a lot, Dr. Yusuf, and I really appreciate this opportunity to be with you guys all, although I see only a name of Ghaith Qubais and Al-Muslihin. I don't see other names, but the others, I suppose, are with us, all university students, right? I suppose.
Yes, some of them are in higher education, like master's, doctoral students. Some of them are engineers. Some of them are in the field of Islamic jurisprudence. So it's various.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to just make it like simple, and you take it like a simple chat that we will chat together. The main issue that I like to mention is 2 points. I want to go a little bit historical, how it developed, and then I want to mention main areas of research that are of great concern, I'm sure, to you guys, to me, and to people like us in the field. So the historical development, well, I mean, when we look at the history of humanity, God created duwalan bayna nas, that the civilization goes from one group or one people to another, and it varies, depends on how energetic they were, how they got lazy, then it will be transferred from them. The Quran tells us, وَإِن تَتَوَلَّوْا يَسْتَبْدِلْ قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ ثُمَّ لَا يَكُونُوا أَمْثَالَكُمْ. Yani when the istibdal happens, the other people won't be the same, will give better things. So historically, we were giving better at some times when we wrote in several areas of dealing with the money, dealing with the properties, dealing with finance, dealing with the material things, dealing with the satisfaction of the unwanted needs and desires of a human being, using the resources that are available. And of course, the resources are restricted, are rare, are scarce in that sense. Okay, there was a time when our ancestors dealt with these issues and wrote marvelous things and marvelous writings for their times, like Kitab al-Kharaj, which is a great book in the development of agriculture. and in the finance of agricultural development. The book, and there were several books written on the basis of that book of Abu Yusuf. Then Kitab al-Amwal, which is an excellent book in talking about the public finance in different aspects, how the revenues come, how are spent, what kind of revenues and different kind of them. And again, Qasim ibn Ubaid, or Ibn Abi Ubaid, I think, when he wrote his Kitab al-Amwal, there were several books imitating him later that were written by several other writers. So our ancestors were great, but the poet says, please don't tell me about your ancestors, tell me who you are. So it has happened that for some 5 centuries, we were only chewing what our ancestors wrote. We were not writing anything new. And we were not even observing the scientific methodologies and the scientific honesty in our writings. Very often we would steal someone else's writing and adopt it and claim that it is ours. This has been done in our history, unfortunately, over the last 7, 8 centuries, many times. This is why we heard some people saying that, oh, Bab al-Ijtihad is now closed, because after the 4th century, really, genuinity were very rare among the writers, because we started declining. Now, definitely, no doubt about that. We are very proud of our ancestors, and the decline of the Islamic civilization took it 1,000, while building it was only cost us 200 years. We were able to build it, and then the decline took about 1,000 years, not like other nations who were dropping down the hill, in a fall, a complete fall within a short period. Well, when we started our modern, call it, awakeness, of course, that happened in all our Islamic sciences. We started opening our minds. We started talking about ideas again. We started discussing science again. Definitely at that time, the West has surpassed us with several steps. So at a time when there was a time when the intellectuals of Europe used to come to Muslim Spain, or to Damascus, or to Halab, or to Cairo to learn and study, we went to the Western universities, as I was introduced, and people like me also went to Western universities to learn, and we studied. And then with this new knowledge that we acquired, we were able to re-study our history and re-study again our ideas. So here what happened, historically, the early writings on Islamic economics came from Sharia scholars. Not really Sharia scholars in the full sense, rather it came from Islamist renewals or revivalist. Okay, for example, the late Sheikh Muhammad al-Mubarak was Dean of College of Sharia in the University of Damascus, wrote a book about Islamic economics. He wanted to call it Al-Iqtisad al-Islami, Islamic economics. He happened to have asked me, I was a student in my PhD program. He happened to have asked me that, well, what do you think? He sent me really the draft, and what do you think of this? I told him, well, this is fine, but please change the title, call it principles of Islamic economics. You are not talking about Islamic economics, you are talking about principles that are derived from Sharia that are definitely important and effectful to make principles of Islamic economics, but I see no analysis in it, no importance, no discussion about Islamic economics. And I'll come to what are the main points that I really want our students and want ourselves to go and indulge in research on them. So thanks God, the late Sheikh Muhammad al-Mubarak, rahimahullah, he happened to be my father-in-law. He accepted my advice and changed the title of that book. Well, a man came and we came across him when the Muslim Student Association in America invited him. He had very, very few writings, but his merit that he was a graduate from London School of Economics. So he was really an economist with his PhD in economics. His name was, he's still alive. His name is then Muhammad Najatullah Siddiqui. He happened to have been invited by the Muslim Student Association in America in one of our conferences, national conferences at that time. We are very famous and very important for us as students there. I was still in my PhD program. This must be in the year 1974. So I had a discussion with him, and I came to know that he wrote a few books. One of them is the Enterprise in Islam. Enterprise, the individual enterprise. He wrote few ideas about aspects of Islamic economics. So actually, the first stage of writings on Islamic economics came from Islamic revivalist, but non-specialized. And the start of specialized writing. Of course, not every writing after that is specialized also, but specialized writing really started with the early writings of Muhammad Najatullah Siddiqui. Now, you know what we call about Karl Marx book. Karl Marx book, Das Kapital, Ra's al-Mal, is really does not describe what communism is, but it was like the principles of communism. It was the first book that is written in a scientific way about communism. But communists later have passed all the writings of Karl Marx and they left them behind and they don't adopt them anymore because they went several steps ahead and wrote more details. So exactly the same thing happened. Muhammad Najatullah Siddiqui wrote. He's now older person, about not much really, but I think probably about 9 years older than me. I was late in getting my PhD anyway, because I got it at the age of 35. I had to work in Damascus for 9 years after I graduated from my bachelor's, and I wasn't able to go during that period, although I attempted several times to for my PhD. We didn't have any PhD program in Damascus at that time. So Najatullah Siddiqui is really, in a sense, makes the milestone start of writing on Islamic economics by economists. Then came others, came Anas al-Zarqa, Muhammad Anas al-Zarqa, came around the same time, along with Muhammad Najatullah Siddiqui, Muhammad Umar Chapra, and then came Ma'bad al-Jarhi and others. There are now many writings and many writers. So the new stage of Islamic economics is when the writings are done by economists. And these writings, you find in them a clear spirit of mixing the Western objective knowledge that we acquired through studying economics along with the Islamic ideas and principles. So this stage we are still in it. Most of the writings now come from specialized persons who study economics. And whenever we find a person in that field doing something without really being strong in economics, we notice immediately the loopholes in what she or he presents. We quickly notice that there is something missing. What you got from him is not really Islamic economics. He still, or she still lives at the age of principles of Islamic economics, not Islamic economics. Now, what are the areas? Now, one development happened during that period, of course. There is another milestone which is very important, that is the first international conference on Islamic economics, which was held in Mecca al-Mukarramah in the year 1976. Was supposed to be in the year 1970, I think 75, wasn't it? I think 75, but was supposed to be in the year 74, but it was delayed to 76 because of the assassination of King Faisal at that time. Now, we must mention another economist, though he didn't write, but he was behind the scene, very important. That is Muhammad Umar, or Muhammad bin Umar al-Zubair. Muhammad al-Zubair is an economist, graduate from UK with PhD in economics. At that time, he was a main force behind, although he didn't write himself, but he was behind encouraging writers and behind the holding of the first international conference on Islamic economics in 1976. In 1976, so the Muhammad Umar Zubair was instrumental, definitely, in organizing that conference. He was then the president of the university in Jeddah, which is called King Abdulaziz University. And of course, he was before that the dean of the School of Economics in that university. But in his capacity as president, the conference was held. Another moving person, though he wrote quite a bit, but again, like what the communists did with Karl Marx, they surpassed him and surpassed his writings. We did with him also. Khurshid Ahmad, Shafahullah wa Afa. He's still alive, but he's ill, really. And last time I met him 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, rather. But even then, he was ill, hardly being able to contribute and to attend even that conference. We met in a conference in Lahore. So, but anyway, those who contribute more in writing, I mentioned of them, Muhammad Umar Chapra and Muhammad Anas al-Zarqa and Ma'bad al-Jarihi. Now, what are the main features then of this stage of writing on Islamic economics by economists? This stage had different issues. We don't dwell much on the idea of the system. Oh, there are only 3 systems in the world, the capitalism, socialism, and Islam. Well, there are many systems in the world. Don't worry about system, because a system, each country has its own system also, which varies a little bit from there, its versions. Each system has several versions. So this is one. Of course, the sources of knowledge, we do add definitely revelation as a source of knowledge, but honestly speaking, the implication of this addition is more visible in the construction of the Islamic system, of the operational processes of the Islamic system than it is in the principles themselves or in the main ideas. So we come, for instance, like here, revelation, prohibition of riba came in the revelation, no doubt about that, in a clear way, in a clear-cut manner also. So riba is prohibited. What is riba? Again, unlike many people may like to think, there are different definitions of riba and all that. Well, leave all what the fuqaha says and take it from the Quran in the verse of Surah number 2, verse 279, defines what is prohibited. That is anything above your principle, because it says, if you repent, you are entitled to your principle, and you are not entitled to any other thing, meaning that any other thing above principle is what is riba. So it goes without really discussion, and we don't need to go into the discussions of the fuqaha, and it is wrong to bring the discussion of the fuqaha really and the definitions of the fuqaha into economics. Economics is very different from fiqh as a science. So Islamic economics is definitely clearly different from fiqh. Probably you may say in a quick word, if you want to take a difference, it is the opposite of fiqh. The opposite of fiqh, in a sense that fiqh is deriving the minute rulings from the principles and from the text, whereas economics is deriving the principles from the minute behaviors of people. So it is, in a sense, the opposite of fiqh, really. It's not fiqh. It's much closer to what can be called the study of al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, the maxims of fiqh, not fiqh itself. Because that's the way maxims of fiqh are constructed. We look at the details and then we put them together and try to find what is the rule behind these details. That's what economics does. So in economics, then, we definitely benefit a lot from revelation, but we benefit from it in the construction of the Islamic economic system, not in Islamic economics as science. Well, there are many verses definitely that are beneficial in Islamic economics as science. many verses, many texts in the Quran and Sunnah, like what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us, لا يشبع جوف ابن آدم إلا التراب. That is, we are continuously ambitious, we are continuously desirous of getting more and more until we reach under the dust, under the turab, we reach our graves. So it is until graves, yes, we desire more and more, and that is natural. So there are, yes, definitely rules we derive from the original text and from combination of text, but again, we benefit from them more in the construction of the system. Islamic economics today is on one side a science that studies behavior of human being in relation to utilizing the resources that are available, and these resources that are available are definitely scarce, are limited, definitely limited in utilizing them to fulfill and satisfy our desires and needs that have no limit in the final analysis. Definitely, they have no limit with with anything we can say about it, and with any pattern of behavior, there is no limit. I was recently reading kind of simply the outline of one of the Arabic books. So he said, one of the principles of Islamic economics, al-hurriya al-iqtisadiyya al-muqayyada. Where did you get it from, for God's sake? Restricted economic freedom. Are you afraid so much from freedom? Why? Why are you afraid from freedom? Freedom is not fearful at all. Freedom is necessary for any willful action. And definitely there's nothing called in our Sharia al-hurriya al-muqayyada. What do you mean? What do you tell me by al-hurriya al-muqayyada? Al-hurriya is definitely not muqayyada, cannot be muqayyada. I can do anything I want to do, whether it is haram or halal, but my mind tells me, don't do the haram because that is bad. That is morally wrong, that is economically not beneficial in the final analysis also. So that's a decision definitely any person takes, and there's no it's nonsense to talk about hurriya muqayyada. What is the meaning of it's not hurriya. If it is muqayyada, it is not hurriya. Definitely, if it is restricted, how can it be hurriya? It is not hurriya. What are you talking about? You don't know, Mr. Writer. You don't know what Islamic economics is. So definitely, the Quran tells us these principles, but we need to make our own research to understand them and look at the focus points in the Islamic system. Now, if I come to the second part of Islamic economics is studying man as man is, or man or a human being rather as a human being is, and then we add any restrictions or any description of that person, of that human being. Could be Muslim, could be not Muslim. In Islamic economics, when we use the revelation and the observation both together as our sources of knowledge, can't we explain the behavior of a kafir person? The Prophet told us, for instance, Al-Kafiru ya'kulu bi sab'i mi'a wal-mu'minu ya'kulu bi mi'an wahida. That's what the Prophet said it. So how come the Prophet explains, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the behavior toward food of Al-Kafir and of Al-Muslim, and we say Islamic economics is only for Muslims? No, Islamic economics as a science whose sources are Quran and Sunnah, of course, the revelation plus the observation, and there's no contradiction between them. There cannot be any contradiction, and definitely there cannot be a restricted freedom. Freedom can be only freedom, but cannot be restricted. Then we understand that based on these resources, we try to understand the behavior of a human being. And of course, understanding the behavior of a human being, meaning understanding the laws of God in the nature and in the fitra, in the nature of human beings, laws of God in how human beings deal with resources and with their abilities and with how they use them to satisfy their desires and wants, etc., etc. Now, with this, we need the second part of Islamic economics, which is the study of the Islamic economic system. I always use the example of children drawing books. I'm sure all of you may have seen children drawing books, where if you want to the child to draw a duck, for instance, you will find dots, and the child is required to connect these dots. And if the child connects them right, he will find the picture of a dog or a duck, whatever it is. I meant to say duck, not dog. If you want a chicken, then again, the child will draw it that way, connecting the dots. So we need to connect the dots that are given in the Quran and Sunnah. For instance, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about riba and tells us, يَمْحَقُ اللَّهُ الرِّبَى ويربي الصدقات ذلك بأنهم ايش الآية ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وحل الله البيع وحرم الربا والذي يأكل الربا لا يقوم إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس. What is the meaning of that? That the riba system has that problem of cannot stand on its own, cannot be stable, cannot be sustainable. It has an internal serious problem. Studying these in a way that is acceptable to everybody. Now notice in Surah Saba, there is a statement where it says, I'm translating the meaning, it's either you or us are on huda or in dalal. It doesn't say that we are on the huda and you are on dalal, because in argument, you put yourself equal to the other party. Exactly. You cannot say you are wrong and I am right. So when you are arguing, and you cannot argue on the basis of what you have, because the other party doesn't believe in it, doesn't accept it. So here, again, the next verse in Surah Saba itself, it says, you will not be asked about the crimes we did, and we will not be asked about what actions you took. It doesn't say crimes. It attributes crime to us. You think we did crimes. We will not be asked about these crimes, and we are quoting you. You think that we did crimes. In fact, we did not. We believe we are right, but for the sake of argument, we put ourselves with you exactly on the same ground. Either we or you are wrong. Either we or you are on the right path or on the wrong path. Either one of us could be. Let's discuss it. Let's argue it. That's the point here. So it's exactly the same way we need to discuss what is the meaning of يمحق الله الربا ويربي الصدقات. What is the meaning of لا يقوم إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس. Once we understand these, and then we go on to explain the aspects of the Islamic economic system as based on these fundamental texts, and also, of course, on the Islamic heritage of knowledge. We don't need to neglect, and it is wrong, definitely, to neglect what our ancestors have done. They have done a lot of good things, a lot of marvelous things. So we don't want to neglect them. They made many mistakes too, and we don't want to really absolve them from their mistakes. No, whatever mistakes they made, we don't accept these mistakes and we reject them. And we say it, you guys made a mistakes, our ancestors. But in certain areas, for instance, the claim that God created gold and silver as money, that's incorrect. That's a false statement that was said by some shuyukh in the past, in some age, where people thought that there's nothing can be used as money other than gold or silver. And then they thought from their own minds, definitely it's not from hadith or from Quran or from our basic sources, it is from their mind that, oh, these are nuqud bil khilqa, by their nature created as money. Today there are no more money, and today what is money? As a matter of fact, what is money? Probably many of our students may, money is only a claim. It is a debt, call it. It's a debt on the economy, a debt on that economy. If I own a dollar, I own a debt on anyone who accepts the dollar for payment, that I can give it to him and take apple from him, or take or fulfill my obligation toward him or her, of course. So you see, the Arabic language talks about him as insan, not him as man, in contrast to woman. It's not like the English language. So in Arabic, we don't need to always say him or her. No, when we say him, we mean him and her together, because it is the insan, not the man, not the masculinity of the damir. Okay, or the pronoun. Okay, so the idea here, we benefit from all what our ancestors wrote, and we need to understand it in the context of contemporary living and in the context of the level of knowledge that we have today worldwide. Now, I come now, what do we need then? What is the future? Okay, the future is we need to study Islamic economics not as fiqh, not as fiqh al-ibadat. We need to study Islamic economics as a science of economics, definitely with Islamic sources of knowledge, with the scientific approach that is, as a matter of fact, ours. It was ours, and the Europeans took it from us. The scientific approach that is based on إن السمع والبصر والفؤاد كل أولئك كان عنه مسؤولا. That is, we use our means of acquiring knowledge and of discussing knowledge in a scientific matter, using observation and using definitely revealed sources. Now, where are the focus points of today's research? to answer this question, I want to make a little introduction. Unfortunately, because of the finance, we were a bit tilted toward Islamic banking and finance. Many of them think of them, these are the Islamic economic system. And we left other areas that are very, very important. Fundamentally, I should say, we left in a quick word the area of fundamental human behavior, the individual ethics of behavior that are basic in creating economic abilities, in creating development. And then we also missed the focus on the part of development and how development is done in an economy, which is very important, in fact. And I do understand that finance is important, but we gave it a little bit 2 more degrees than what it deserves, at the expenses of losing discussion on development and losing discussion on the role of a human being in creating economic value. So these 2 things, I believe, are very, very important, that we need really to focus on them, of course, in addition, without neglecting the finance aspect. Now, for instance, in the finance, look at the development, how it happened. In the past, people wrote, including me, thought that the only alternative of financing on riba is interest, no doubt. The only alternative of financing on riba, we thought at one time, is financing through mudaraba, because in riba financing, you give money, loan, and in financing through mudaraba, you also give money. So we thought this is the alternative. When Islamic banks came, we noticed that Islamic banks used actually sale as an alternative. The first alternative that Islamic banks used, alternative of riba financing, is sale financing, essentially sale on credit, which took the name of murabaha. So we financed on sale on credit. So sale on credit could be a good alternative of riba-based financing. And in fact, it is being practiced by all Islamic banks to a large extent. And those banks that claim it is not 90% in their banks, their claim is actually false, because whatever non-murabaha they have is very, very similar to murabaha, but it's like a murabaha under different name. So it is really murabaha. So financing really, basically, it is done for many reasons, and I don't want to discuss it. But the idea here, when we thought that the alternative of interest-based lending is mudaraba, then definitely we thought that what is the difference? The difference here is sharing risk. So everybody was talking about sharing risk as a principle of in Islamic finance. But when actually murabaha came, and murabaha doesn't have sharing risk, because in murabaha, each person, murabaha is sale on credit. In sale, each person carries his own risk. When the property is in my hand, I carry the risk of that property. The moment I sell it to you and hand it to you, you carry your own risk. I don't share with you anything. So there is no sharing of risk. So the principle now is with great difficulty It has not moved completely yet, but it is moving toward, instead of sharing risk as a principle of Islamic finance, it is rather owning asset. So Islamic finance is asset-based. And if I own an asset and sell it on credit at a higher price, I make proper Islamic finance. That is sale on credit. So Islamic finance then is not risk-sharing based, rather it is asset-based. And if it is asset-based, then what does it mean? It means really an important thing, which we were not able to explain when we talked about risk sharing. It means that you cannot finance anything without having a real asset that generates added value to be exchanged through the finance transaction. Notice the big difference now. Now, what is the implication then of being asset finance? A basic and fundamental implication, which we were not aware of at all when we thought about risk sharing. The important implication, extremely important, is that there cannot be any single dollar finance done in Islamic finance unless accompanied by a real market transaction that moves an asset from one hand to another. So notice here the sticking to the real market transaction. That explains, as a matter of fact, a set of hadith and a set of ahkam shar'iyya in fiqh that يحرم بيع المعدوم. It is prohibited to sell a thing that doesn't exist. It is prohibited to sell a thing that you don't own. It is prohibited to sell a thing that you don't hold. You don't have possession of. All these come under sticking to the real market. All these are transactions that are not real. There is no real asset that is being exchanged in them. So notice when we changed the foundation from risk sharing to being asset-based, then we started opening our eyes to implications that we were not aware of when we were sticking to the idea of risk sharing. Because all risk sharing does is that I take part of the risk, you take part of it. Then what happened to the real market? It could be fake. All this risk could be fake. Doesn't have to be real. So then what are you talking about? So when we talk about Islamic finance as asset-based is really a big difference, big difference. And here I want our students to notice that and then to come up with research about the implications of this difference. Then the difference becomes sticking to the real market. You cannot have a single finance transaction without having accompanying real market transaction that is goods moving from one hand to another. And that is something different. That will explain, for instance, when Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami sat down together with about 300 scholars in economics and in Sharia and in different areas of Sharia, when they sat together and discussed al-ikhtiyarat, al-options, and they said options, although are recognized rights, financial rights that are recognized in the law, but in Sharia they are not suitable to be purchased, owned, sold, or traded. Now, in the discussion behind the scene, which is not in the decision, you don't see it in the decision, but you see it in the discussion, which I was part of in Majma' al-Fiqh, you notice that why? Because there is no asset that can generate added value. If I sell you a computer, the computer can generate added value because you use it before you pay me. You are paying me next year and you are using it for a year, so you got that benefit. Here, there is an added value created in the deferred payment sale, in sale on credit, in murabaha sale, in other words. But and this you don't find this kind of added value in the option, in the ikhtiyarat, as translated by Majma' al-Fiqh. So here where part of the implication why riba is prohibited, because the debt does not create added value. Again, come back, asset-based. Riba is prohibited because it is not based on an asset that can create added value. It is based on a debt, and the debt does not create added value. So all these we need then when we will actually notice, and I feel that our dear students should notice this difference. It's a big difference. It's bigger than everybody of you at this moment think, including me also. It's a lot more that when we talked about Islamic finance as risk sharing, whereas Islamic finance as asset-based, then we are talking about different kind of paradigm that regulates the finance market. And if it regulates the finance market and stick it exactly to the real market, then the role of finance becomes different. Those of you who studied finance, we talk about banking book and we talk about the trading book in the finance transactions in banking. We eliminate actually all trading books. There will be no trading books in the concept of Islamic finance. There will be banking books that is financing of other people through either sale or leasing or sharing. So all these then we need to really focus on them. To summarize, I want you to focus on development, individual ethics that lead to development. The difference between the personal ethics in your person and the personal ethics that relate to your relation with others and with things around you. So these are two sets of ethics. I want to focus on this, including what Mawardi called the public sector asset. Assets when we deal with the public issues. Again, ethics when we deal with the public issues. So this is another matter. Then focus on the development, the ethics, and the implications of the new theory, call it, of Islamic finance, that is Islamic finance is asset-based. And then if Islamic banks make a mistake in tawarruq, we say why? Because it is no more asset-based. So tawarruq is no more asset-based. Here is where the mistake that you made. You violated the fundamental principle of Islamic finance, which is asset-based. Okay, well, I will conclude with this, and I hope I was of benefit to you guys. And I hope we have some ideas to take home with us. Thank you, Dr. Yusuf. I really appreciate your inviting me to your class, and I enjoyed being with you. And definitely I am open if my colleagues want any question, so I am ready for that.
Of course, Professor, first of all, we are honored. It was a really great 50 minutes, and it's a great lecture. It's mind-opening lecture, especially when it comes to Islamic economics. Where most of the people are in the shadow because we're not, because if you're not specialized in the subject, you don't know what's happening. You hear about Islamic finance, Islamic economics, and you think about banks and this stuff. So I will be starting the questions, if I may, to take advantage of the opportunity. And I would say we've been pondering with the students before and asking ourselves, the Islamic economics, the modern Islamic economics, like grew, developed in, uh, let's say, a capitalist environment, if I would say. So some scholars would say, oh, they were pondering to, what if the the Islamic economics developed in a, let's say, socialist pool of ideas? What if it was, there's another why the system now is so heavily invested in the capitalist products, and it doesn't have this kind of a, let's say, an independent nature of itself?
I really, I deny this accusation, honestly. There was a time when our thinkers thought that way. If you read the books of Mustafa Sibai today, you will find him talking about socialism and so on. And even before him, some 50 years before Mustafa Sibai, Ahmad Shawqi, when he addresses in his couplet the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, saying, "Al-ishtirakiyuna anta imamuhum, lawla da'awa al-qawmi wal-ghalwa'u." So you are the best ishtiraki. In that sense, I wouldn't say that Ahmad Shawqi was wrong. Really, from that angle, when you look at it, definitely the Prophet ﷺ made for the poor a lot more what all the socialists did. But when we grew a bit older, we notice, and a bit wiser, we notice, and that is where I say our starting point is really محمد نجاة الله صديقي. يعني رعاه الله وعافاه. يعني إن شاء Allah, he is in good health now, but he is not much of able to move much. So definitely, because he was trained as economist, and then from his angle as economist, definitely he studied socialism and he studied also capitalism. And but the fact that he studied in the Western school doesn't mean that he has become like underground or undergarment or hidden capitalist. You should notice one thing. We had a colleague, rahmatullah alayh, died a few months ago rather, probably 3 months only. Dr. Arif Arsoy. Arif Arsoy was a colleague of us here in Sabahattin Zaim University. He has a statement which is really very beautiful to answer this kind of query or this kind of worry also. The capitalist system was not imposed by someone who thought it should be this way and came and forced it on everybody. It was developed through interaction of a human being. Some of these human beings are devilish. Some of them are good, of course. So through that development and interaction of a human being, the system was developed. So there were then many elements in this system that are related to al-fitra, and Islam is Deen al-fitra. To the nature of a human being. There are many elements also that were imposed over it. Like, for instance, earning without producing, profiteering without producing. How can you profit without producing? Now take the Bitcoin, for instance. You profit from it, but how come you profit from doing what? Doing nothing. You have done nothing that benefit any single human being by the whole idea of Bitcoin from day one until now. And yesterday it was $40,000 a Bitcoin, which is silly. It's only that silly mind. Similar to that, the options, for instance. What do you own when you own an option? You really own nothing. Nothing that can produce any benefit to any human being. But when I earn in Islamic finance through murabaha, I give you a computer and you pay me next year. I give you a refrigerator and you pay me next year. I give you a house and you pay me over 10 years, for instance. So this is real benefit, real value that is being created. So this is a big difference then between, but yes, we have points where we kind of intercept with capitalism. We have also points where we intercept with socialism. For instance, zakah being a tax on income and wealth. In the capitalist system, across the board, they don't like property tax. There's no property tax almost. Yani all the financial properties in the finance markets, which are a lot more huge and more, I mean, in numbers, in astronomic numbers of dollars. You are not talking about trillions or whatever. What are the things after trillions? You are talking about astronomic numbers in the amount of funds that are used, for instance, in internet trading of currencies. And that is all zero, as a matter of fact. Nothing doesn't bring any benefit to any human being. So all that is denied. So don't tell me you live under capitalism. I deny this capitalist attitude. I would not accept at all the idea of profiting without producing. You need to produce a real value in order to earn part or all that real value. Depends on how it is produced. So it is not an issue that we are under capitalism today. No, we are today liberated from both, and we can think as human beings based on the main sources of knowledge in Islam, revelation and observation.
Okay, so student Safa Mahdawi says that have we had a successful Islamic economic system like in the modern age?
Okay, I tell you what Lee did in, and I want to take a non-Muslim example, in Singapore, over 30 years, improving the economic lot of each individual in his country. For 30 years, about 30 times. Yani the one who had income of $10 became 300. So he improved it that way over 30 years. And does that fall under the ideas of Islamic economics? Or what? Definitely it falls under. This is an example of a successful action. He did not derive it from Islamic economics, definitely, but it fits in most of its elements within the concept of Islamic economics. What similarly the approach Mahathir did within 18 years of his rule, in which he was able to raise the per capita income more than 10 times. In the 20 years of AK party in Turkey, since 2002 until now, a little less than 20 years, they were able, even with the crisis over the, I mean, if you take the last 3 years, before the last 3 years, they were able to raise it about 6 times. يعني Turks before that were not able to live in a living room that has a bathroom. Now almost every Turk here has a living room with a bathroom in it. So these changes, this development, does that fall under the principles of Islamic economics or not? Definitely it does. So the improvement of the lives of people, that the economic enjoyment of people, isn't that part of Islamic economics? Definitely it is. So we need to look at it as a world system, not really as a system for a group of people who call themselves Muslim. Most of them pray, and half of them pray without wudu, and maybe the other half pray even hypocritically. So God knows it's not. So
Yeah.
talking about the ideas of development, the ideas of human ethics that lead to development, the ideas of finance system and structure and paradigm that also leads to development without creating any negativity, like profiteering without producing. That's definitely Islamic economics. So the more we go into that direction, that is Islamic economics.
Okay, so I will be going to the. Do you prefer to I get like we have the three questions? Do you prefer that we give you
It's okay. No,
the
it's
three
okay.
questions?
Let's take these 3 questions and we close.
Yes. Okay. So yes. So we have somebody wants to speak. Please make it brief and go on.
Okay, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, Professor. Thank you very much for this lecture. It was very, very interesting. First, I just wanted to ask about what is asset-based in Arabic, and the question that I have is why do we need, like, do we really need to make an Islamic economic system, or is it more realistic that we just accommodate like Islamic economic principles to whatever system is going on, except of course if there's an inherent flaw within the system, like for example in capitalism. Can we say, for example, in capitalism as well, that there is like an inherent gharar in common bay'a, etc. My other question is are there like any economic principles that are only tied, Islamic economic principles that are only tied to the historic context of the iqta' of the times of the Prophet? And if you could talk
this last point, I didn't understand it, so I'll ask you to repeat it, but later.
Okay.
If you allow me to answer the first 2 points, the one that is quickly, asset-based means تمويل مبني على الأصول الحقيقية. Do we need an Islamic economic system? Yes. You remember my example of children writing, drawing books? I mean, you have, for instance, a distribution of wealth before the beginning of production, as called by the late, what's his name, the head of Shia in Iraq, the author of اقتصادنا. What's his name? Remind me of his name. Anyway, he called it distribution before production. No, before, a lot before, the Iraqi one.
محمد باقر الصدر.
Baqir al-Sadr, yes. Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, he calls it the distribution before production. Inheritance system in the Islamic system has fundamental differences from the system that is adopted in the Western economies and Western laws today. And it is based really on a fundamental Islamic ideas that the property really belongs to God. So when I die, I no more owns anything. God owns it and God distributes it. And it is meant definitely and clearly to fragment ownership without fragmenting the size of the firm. Size of the firm need not to be fragmented, even though the ownership is fragmented. And these are two different things, not like what Timur Quran thought wrongly, that the Islamic inheritance system fragments the size of the farm. That's incorrect. That's kind of flowing above the idea rather than looking at the idea. So we have really, and you call it now, we come back to Dr. Yusuf, it's something, a great socialist idea would be to really fragment property. And not having, especially the verse that it says, كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ. So in Islamic inheritance system, the Islamic system is something like closing the distance between the dots in the drawing book of a child. So you need the Islamic inheritance system is here, along with it, the finance system there, the ethics of production, the ethics of consumption. How do we relate ownership to production? How do we relate ownership to finance? So all these, then these are different dots there. Connect them together and you find a system. There is a system already. It's not something that needs to be created. It already exists as a system. It needs to be adopted, implemented, and definitely the implementation is a gradual matter. No doubt. It won't be that, in one shot we drop a system and we put another system. The Prophet ﷺ didn't accept that kind of approach. He told us that he was sent to complete makarim al-akhlaq, to complete the good deeds, the good action. And in every aspect, part of it is the economic system. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Professor.
Yes.
Yes, we have taken a lot of you, and thank you very much for that.
Okay.
And yes, I will be sending, if you have any questions, write them on me on the group, and I will be sending them to the professor, inshallah, so he would answer them at the time of his, that suits him. And sorry for the other questions, I will be sending them to Professor Monzer. We had a great time, really. And we're really sorry that this hour had ended. And we will have a great pleasure if we had you inshallah future classes. Thank you for your time, and thanks to the student again for your time. أسأل الله العظيم أن يجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما وألا يجعل فينا شقيا ولا محروما. Thank you again, Professor, and hope we see you soon.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate. Please, if you send me by email, not on the WhatsApp.
I will. I will.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
Assalamu alaikum. Fi aman Allah. Ma assalam.